The day the doctor uttered the word terminal, time fractured. It was as if the world had suddenly stopped spinning and everything I knew was thrown into chaos. It wasn't a surprise, not really. The coughs had worsened. The weight loss was impossible to ignore. I had been feeling off for months, but I kept pushing it aside, hoping it was just stress or a minor illness. Still, hearing it aloud, it felt like a punch to the gut. The reality of it all hit me like a tidal wave, and I was drowning in a sea of emotions. 6 months, maybe a year if I was lucky. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Cancer. A cruel joke, really. It felt like my body had betrayed me, turning against itself in the most vicious way possible. I was 32, just starting to feel like I had a handle on life. I had dreams, plans, and a future that seemed bright and full of possibilities. Now, staring down my own mortality, all I had was Frodo, my ginger tabby. He had been my companion through thick and thin, always there with a comforting purr. He was curled up on the foot of the hospice bed, a furry, purring anchor to a world that suddenly felt like it was spinning off its axis. His presence was a small comfort in the midst of the storm. The hospice was peaceful, serene, too serene. It felt like a place where time stood still, a waiting room for the inevitable. It felt like a waiting room for the inevitable. The quietness was deafening, and the stillness was suffocating. I craved life, even with its uncertainties and heartbreaks. I longed for the chaos, the noise, the unpredictability of it all. I wanted to feel alive, to experience everything life had to offer, even if it was just for a little while longer. Little did I know life had other plans, plans far more terrifying and extraordinary than I could have ever imagined. It was as if the universe had decided to throw me one last curveball, a final test of my strength and resilience. I decided to fight. I wasn't going to let this diagnosis define me. I packed my bags, said my goodbyes, and set out on a journey to find a cure, or at the very least to make the most of the time I had left. I explored every option from traditional treatments to alternative therapies. I meditated, changed my diet, and sought out specialists who offered a glimmer of hope. I documented my journey, writing in a journal and taking photographs. I wanted to leave behind a legacy, something that would remind people of who I was and what I stood for. I found solace in the simple things like watching the sunset, walking on the beach, and gazing at the stars. These moments of peace and beauty gave me strength and reminded me of the wonders of life. My friends and family rallied around me, their love and support a constant source of comfort. We celebrated every milestone, every small victory, and cherished the time we had together. As I look back on my life, I realized that it wasn't the length of time that mattered, but the quality of the moments I had lived. I was determined to make every second count, to live with purpose and passion. And so, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unbroken, I faced the future with courage. Life had taken a turn, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to overcome any challenge. A marionette show, Sam? Really, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the flyer. It seemed so out of place, almost surreal.
My best friend Eric peered at me over his glasses, his expression a mixture of amusement and concern. You hate puppets. He knew me well, perhaps too well.
He wasn't wrong. Puppets had always given me the creeps, their lifeless eyes and jerky movements. But something about this show was different. But the flyer had caught my eye. Bright colors, whimsical characters, a promise of escape from the sterile confines of the hospice. It was like a beacon of hope in a sea of monotony. Come on, Eric, live a little. I nudged him playfully, trying to mask my own apprehension, or at least let me live a little. I needed this more than I cared to admit.
The theater was small, tucked away on a side street in Greenwich Village. It had an air of mystery, like a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. An old-fashioned marquee, flickering with a string of bare bulbs, announced the show Carnival of Dreams. The name itself was enchanting, promising a journey into the fantastical. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and anticipation. The seats were worn, the curtains frayed, but there was a magic in the air, a sense of something extraordinary about to unfold. Then it happened. Chaos erupted, screams pierced the air. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. A man in the row ahead of us, his face contorted in a grotesque snarl, lunged at his companion, teeth bared. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The world tilted on its axis. Everything we knew, everything we believed in, was suddenly thrown into question. This was not part of the show. The audience was in shock, confusion, and fear etched on every face. What was happening? Why was this happening? The questions swirled in my mind, but there were no answers, only chaos. People began to rush towards the exits, a frantic scramble for safety. The once magical theater had turned into a scene of pandemonium. I gripped the armrests of my seat, my knuckles white with tension. Eric was beside me, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. My eyes darted around, searching for answers, for some sign that this was all just a terrible dream. But it wasn't. This was real. On the stage, the marionettes continued their dance, oblivious to the chaos around them. Their lifeless eyes seemed to mock us, a chilling reminder of the surreal nightmare we were trapped in. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity. The screams, the chaos, the fear, it all blended into a nightmarish symphony. Finally, emergency responders arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. Order began to be restored, but the sense of dread lingered. People comforted each other, trying to make sense of what had happened. The theater, once a place of dreams, had become a place of nightmares. The flyer lay on the ground, trampled and torn, a stark contrast to the bright, whimsical promise it had once held. The world had changed, and so had we. As the sun rose over the city, a new day dawning, we knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The world had changed, and we had to find a way to navigate this new reality. Life moved on, but the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of how quickly everything can change. We had witnessed the world shift on its axis, and we would never forget it. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of resolve. We would face this new world head-on together, because when the world changes, we must change with it.
The next few hours were a blur. Instinct took over. Hide, run, survive. I found myself trapped inside the theater, the once whimsical marionettes now looming like grotesque sentinels in the dim emergency lighting. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the guttural growls of things that were once human. Silence became my shield. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of fabric sent my heart racing. I pressed myself against the cool concrete wall, my hand clamped over Frodo's mouth, stifling his terrified meows. Through a crack in the velvet curtains, I saw them, the creatures. They moved with a horrifying, jerky gait, their eyes vacant, their flesh rotting, drawn to the scent of living flesh. Hope. It felt as fragile as a cobweb, but it flickered within me. I had to escape, for Frodo, for whatever life I had left.
The emergency generator sputtered, casting flickering shadows that danced across the dusty props and backdrops. It wouldn't last long.
I had to make a move, the fire escape, my only chance.
Taking a deep breath, she slipped out from behind the stage flats, her heart pounding against her ribs. The air was heavy, thick with the stench of decay. She crept along the wall, her senses on high alert.
A low growl sent a shiver down my spine. Closer now.
The generator coughed again, the lights dimming further. Panic surged through her. She had to reach the fire escape before the light died completely, plunging her into darkness, into the waiting clutches of those things. Manhattan had become a concrete jungle in the truest sense. The once bustling streets, filled with the hum of life and the rhythm of daily routines, now lay silent and overgrown. Nature had begun to reclaim the city, vines creeping up the sides of skyscrapers and weeds sprouting through the cracks in the pavement. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the distant echoes of a world that once was. Buildings smoked, cars lay overturned and burning, their horns blaring in a discordant symphony of chaos. The once orderly grid of streets had become a labyrinth of destruction, with every corner revealing a new horror. The skyline, once a symbol of human achievement, was now a jagged silhouette against a sky choked with smoke and ash. The city had become a war zone, a battleground where survival was the only goal.
I had managed to escape the theater, Frodo clinging to me like a furry lifeline, but we were far from safe. The theater, once a place of joy and entertainment, had become a death trap. The seats, now empty and covered in dust, were a stark reminder of the lives that had been lost. Frodo, my loyal companion, was my only source of comfort in this nightmare. His small body trembled with fear, but his presence gave me the strength to keep moving. The streets were treacherous, littered with debris and prowled by those creatures. Every step was a gamble, every shadow a potential threat. The creatures, once human, were now twisted and deformed, driven by an insatiable hunger. Their eyes, devoid of any humanity, scanned the streets for their next victim. The sound of their footsteps, slow and deliberate, sent chills down my spine. I knew that one wrong move could mean the end. Their moans echoed through the desolate canyons of buildings, a constant reminder of the nightmare that had engulfed the city. The sound was haunting, a symphony of despair that filled the air. It was a reminder of what had been lost, of the lives that had been forever changed. The city, once a beacon of hope and opportunity, was now a place of fear and uncertainty. The moans were a constant reminder that we were not alone, that danger was always lurking just around the corner.
She was making her way north towards Harlem, hoping against hope that she might find some semblance of order, some sanctuary amidst the chaos. The journey was long and arduous, every step a test of her endurance. The streets, once familiar, were now alien and unrecognizable. The landmarks that had once guided her were now obscured by debris and destruction. But she pressed on, driven by a desperate need to find safety, to find others who had survived. That's when she met him. In the midst of the chaos, amidst the ruins of a once great city, she found a glimmer of hope. It was a chance encounter, a moment of serendipity that would change everything. In a world where trust was a rare commodity, this meeting was a beacon of light in the darkness.
Eric! He had been separated from our group in the theater. The last time I had seen him, he was fighting off one of the creatures, his face a mask of determination. I had feared the worst, but seeing him now, alive and well, was a miracle. His presence was a reminder that we were not alone, that there was still hope. Seeing him, a beacon of familiarity in the madness, was like a punch to the gut. The emotions that had been buried deep within me came rushing to the surface. Relief that he was alive. Gratitude that we had found each other. Fear for what lay ahead. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered emotion. A brief respite from the constant fear and uncertainty. Relief, gratitude, fear, all rolled into one. The weight of the world seemed to lift, if only for a moment. But the reality of our situation quickly set in. We were still in danger, still fighting for our lives. The reunion, while joyous, was also a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. We had to stay strong, to keep moving, to survive.
Sam, thank God you're okay. We need to keep moving. It's not safe here. Eric's voice was filled with urgency, a stark contrast to the relief I felt. He was right. We couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. The creatures were always on the move, always searching for their next victim. We had to stay one step ahead to keep moving, to survive.
Sam and Eric, their faces grimy and streaked with sweat, made their way through the deserted streets of New York. The city, once a symbol of hope and opportunity, was now a place of fear and uncertainty. Every step was a test of their endurance, every corner a potential threat. But they pressed on, driven by a desperate need to survive, to find safety, to find others who had survived. The ruins of a car barricade blocked the street behind them, smoke and flames billowing into the sky. The barricade, once a symbol of resistance, was now a reminder of the chaos that had engulfed the city. The flames, a stark contrast to the cold, gray sky, were a reminder of the destruction that had been wrought. But Sam and Eric pressed on, driven by a desperate need to survive, to find safety, to find others who had survived.